Hey, how you doing? We're going to go ahead and look at some of your exercises from this past week here. The first thing I want to briefly discuss is going to be your bench press in terms of development. Let's go ahead and see how this is looking. Yeah, it's looking just fine. Um, Yeah, so this is going to be the last block. This upcoming block is going to be the last one that we're doing heavy backload work. We're likely going to switch it up very soon to heavy front load work, which should help a lot. And what you'll notice is you'll struggle a little bit with pushing load in backload work. You'll struggle with it quite a bit. It's very hard to do. But once you switch to front loaded, holy shit, do your numbers go up. It's unbelievable. Me, for example, like in my last training block I created myself, uh, it was what was it? Working towards big goal of mine, 500-pound bench. Been thinking about it my whole life, and I was at around 485 doing backloaded or about 480 backloaded pause singles. And this is my first week, a new block where I switched to front loaded work, and I just did a 495 that felt like it was 400. Like it's unbelievably easy once you switch back over to front loaded work, and you're kind of potentiating that ability to handle heavy load through doing it under fatigue. So when you go through when you switch to front load work, it becomes a lot easier. Things feel cakey. It's really nice. We're going to be doing that very soon. That is something to look forward to, because once we do switch to front loaded, I think you're going to feel a lot better about that facet of your lifting. And we're adding a few new variations in that should specifically help to better your positional demands under really fucking heavy weight. We're doing some backloaded tempo concentric singles this block that I think are just going to be very beneficial for you. So there's a few things we're throwing in there that I think are going to help a lot on top of switching to front loaded work soon. So really exciting stuff there. Looking at this there, not a whole lot to break down there. We're going to go and move on to here. One thing I do want to just throw in there is in terms of camera angle, I want to get this bad boy a little bit higher. Like instead of being here, let's go ahead and get it up here, a little higher, a little to the right. Help me see your bar path, help me see your bottom position, help me see quite a few things a lot better. So go ahead and do me that favor starting next week. Your squat this past week didn't look like it was as good as it's been in previous weeks. There's a few reps there we went into slight extension because we rushed the hinge so much. A commonality you'll notice amongst pretty much all really good squatters I've seen that aren't genetic outliers, just genetic freak of lifters, but you'll notice a very common consistency that they go very slow in the eccentric, and that's because you kind of need to control the mechanics and set yourself up for a good position, avoid any spine issues. But what I'm noticing here is that we're speeding the eccentric, or sorry, the hinge at the start of the squat up so much that we're going to do a slight extension. So there's a few reps, not all of them, but there's a few reps where instead of going here and squatting down at a normal rate, we instead went here and we went so fast that I saw this open up. I saw it go open scissor on a few different reps. And it's just because when you go that fast on the hinge, it is so hard to control. Very few people can do it, nor do you really need to. So if you want to go a little faster on the way down, that's okay. The bottom 2/3 of the eccentric, you can use your muscle elasticity, go a little faster for higher volume sets. But this hinge, I always want to take fairly slow, and then we can go down at proper speed. But the reason we're hinging first to have really good control over it and do so to perfection. But when we go from this fast to this fast, we're likely going to open this scissor up, cause breathing and bracing issue, or bracing issues more like, and then obviously lumbar extension, change like dental relationships, all those bad things come out to play. So I really want to slow down that initial hinge in the weeks to follow. And looking at a few reps here, you can kind of see what I mean. There's a few different reps where you can see this open scissor happening in the front. If you look very carefully, you know what to look for. There's a certain, right there it happened. That was a little better, but there was a certain way the belt moves that always demonstrates it. I think this rep was a great example. You can see slight extension happening right there. Slight extension happening. The belt always moves in a certain way that demonstrates it well. So what I want to do is just be a little more consistent with slowing down the first third of the eccentric, really focusing on, and one thing I did think I saw, I'm not 100% sure, it's hard to really see exactly how it's happening, but some individuals will make the mistake, and I think we're kind of doing this too, they'll make the mistake of taking a nice breath, and then before they draw down on their rib cage and press up against the belt, right before they do that, they start hinging. When you start hinging in a position and start hinging with no rigidity down here, extension, flexion, all kinds of issues almost always happen. So I want to really make sure that we're taking that nice diaphragmatic breath, drawing down on the rib cage as hard as we can, pressing into that belt, and then hinging. Be very, very segmented with those motions or with those cues. Front squat's looking good as always. No issues here at all. You're looking nice and strong. It's going to carry over beautifully into your sumo deadlift. And one thing that's nice to look forward to is we're going to continue front squats for at least one more block. And the front squats are going to have a little smaller pause next block, and we're going to lower the rates, so reps. So you should have an opportunity to handle a lot heavier load. Like the overhead press, no issues here. Yeah, very nice. So I think your sumo deadlift, just in terms of programming, has gotten a lot stronger. I know you said it felt good last week, but looking at this video, this hasn't been our best setup yet. I think there's kind of a commonality over the past week that we're rushing things, just such as the initial hinge and the squat, and now the sumo deadlift setup. But compare this to last week. Last week, your hips drove in beautifully. You can see a meaningful difference from your starting position to your position where you start to lift the weight off the ground. You were almost getting the weight off the ground just by popping your hips in, which is exactly what we want. But if we look at if I could pull up the videos, but hopefully you know what I'm talking about here. Your knees, pretend these fists were my knees. Your knees were coming out, hips were coming in beautifully. All the mechanics look really nice, and you're going nice and slow on the setup. But right here, what I'm noticing is we're just kind of squatting down and going. We're not getting our hips meaningfully closer to the bar. We're not achieving as advantageous positions as we have been the past few weeks. So I want to go ahead and slow this down quite a bit. Come on. No, you son of a bitch. Okay. So let's watch this together once it actually loads here. So really look at your hips there one more time. Watch it again. Watch your hips, watch your knees. Tell me if your hips got meaningfully closer, or at least as much as they did last week. You'll notice that they're just kind of going down. So let's really, really change that up and be sure that every single time we're doing our sumo, they're getting meaningfully close. We're taking a few extra seconds to get them as close as we can as that weight starts to pop off the ground, knees go out, chest comes up and back, all that good stuff we've been talking about and you've been accomplishing in the last few weeks. Hinging looked a lot better on the pin squats than the previous sets. A lot better. Yeah, no more extension. That looked a lot improved. I think that's about it for this week. Last few notes I have for you is just make sure in the weeks to follow with your sumo deadlift specifically. For your sumo deadlift specifically, just make sure that we're taking a few extra seconds to set up and really push yourself. Ask yourself, how close can I get my hips to load, and really work on that aspect more than anything. It'd also be a really good idea for you to videotape your workup sets along with your first few working sets and look at the video and ask yourself, do I need to make adjustment to my setup right now? Because usually in your warm-ups, if our hips aren't coming in as well as they could, we can always make that adjustment as we come up and kind of employ some extra strategies to getting better at it. I also want you to go ahead and try a few workup sets where you do the 2-count pause, 1 inch off the ground, getting it off the ground just by wedging our hips in and building tension. It's going to be a really good way to practice as you're working up and load for your working sets. So let's go ahead and try that tactic as well. Just make sure that we're not actually coming up with it. We're just going to go ahead and wedge our hips in, go through all the right mechanics and get it 1 inch off the ground, 2-count pause, drop it back down. We're just practicing our setup and making sure we're wedging the way where we're building the most tension possible. So let's really push those mechanics next week. For the squat, slow down the hinge just a little bit more. Everything else looking really good. I'm excited for us to start this new block together. Let's go ahead and take this first week nice and slow. Give us plenty of room to progress in the future, and let me know if you have any questions on the variations. Stay safe out there.